is a recording of the concert given by the Church Lads and Church Girls Brigade National Band at the Montfort Hall Leicester.
Honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Montfort Hall and to the first of this kind of concert. And that wasn't me. That the National Band of the Church Lads and Church Girls Brigade has ever staged. We're pleased to see you all, but may I, on your behalf, express our appreciation to those who are here as special guests, and to the Lord Lieutenant of the County and his lady, to the Deputy Lord Mayor of the City of Leicester, to the Governor, of the Brigade and Lady Ward, the Deputy Governor of the Brigade, and to the representatives of our admired colleagues in uniformed youth work from the Scouts and from the Boys' Brigade. We are grateful to you for coming and gracing this concert with your presence, for the dignity you confer upon the efforts of those who have worked for this, and for the honour that you bring to us by your interest. May I thank you for coming and sharing this occasion with us. It's a few short years ago that this national band of the Church Lads and Church Girls Brigade was founded. And in that time it has done some remarkable things. It has played for Her Majesty the Queen at the Royal Tournament, and also made a second appearance at the Royal Tournament. It has played in international competitions. It has brought pleasure to thousands of people in different parts of the country during their summer tours. And this in a few short years. And it's developed into something in which we take a particular pride. Somebody with a gift for the right kind of expression once said that there's more to the brigade than drums and bugles, and there's more to this band than drums and bugles. They've got instruments I can't even put a name to. I've had a try about one or two of them, and they had better not be repeated. But we find ourselves taking great pleasure in the skill and the competence and that these young folk have developed, and in the sense of pride that they find in their achievements. But we find even greater pride and pleasure in the efforts of those people unseen, behind the scenes, the people that do cooking and cleaning, the people who make preparations and do organising that enables the work of this band to go on. You'll not see many of them tonight, but without them, this kind of endeavour wouldn't be possible. And it's important that we recognise the value of their efforts. But I would like you to greet the man upon whom so much of the success of this band depends. The man whose idea it first was, and whose dedication to see his ideas fulfilled has given so much self-esteem to the young folk who've been part of the band, have given so much pleasure to those of us who care about the public image of this organisation, has given so much pleasure to those who enjoy this kind of music. Ladies and gentlemen, will you greet the bandmaster of our national band, and may I hand over the rest of this evening's proceedings to him, Mike Cyril.
Would you please rise for the national anthem? orderly. I think it was both of us. We would now like to start the proceedings properly by playing what has become a favourite march of ours, almost like a regimental march in an army regiment, Little Bugler. Actually, I'm going to tell you a little story. I've been asked to do this just to sort of fill out on occasions in places. It reminds me, actually, I generally do a lot of playing in symphony concerts, and I've given some of that up to do a bit of this. But at a charity concert, the conductor, at the end of his speech, appealing for funds, said, "Stand up, all those who will donate £10. Well, as you might guess, no one stood up. And the chairman looked around at the audience, hopefully, for a few minutes, then took a card from his pocket, which he passed to the leader. Well, we haven't got a leader in the band here, like we have in the orchestra, but he passed it to the leader of the orchestra, who nodded, having read it, and quickly passed it to the orchestra to read. On the card was written, "When I asked them to stand up for £5, everybody play the national anthem." Well, our next march is another great favourite of ours, which spotlights the bugles quite a bit, Marching Through Georgia. We're now going to feature our bugle section. We're rather proud of our buglers. They're a good set. Well, they all are really, all of them. We're quite proud of the bugle section because it upholds the traditions, one of the traditions of the brigade, and that is the bugle and drum corps tradition. We're going to have a go at, for you, the post horn and echoes. We've placed our soloist up in 3 6/8. Piece is a super piece for band, featured in the film The Deer Hunter, and was first introduced by John Williams, the international solo guitar player, the Cavatina by Stanley Myers. call them Tinkerbells. But I think they look down their nose at that title a little bit. Our Bell Eye section are going to play a piece called HP and Popcorn. Our next piece, I'm sorry, my mistake, I stood the viewers up. Could you sit down, gentlemen, and ladies, please? Our next piece is a very well-known piece in film-going circles after the film of the same title. The music by Van Gellis, Chariots of Fire. chance to get their lips back in stretch for the next set of pieces, which are quite taxing for them. As most of you probably know from the programme notes, we draw the band from 23 counties of the British Isles, and including Northern Ireland. And we're very pleased for one member from Northern Ireland. His parents are here this evening. They've made the trip across. It's the very first time they've seen the band, and it's the first time that they've seen him in the band. So we're very pleased to welcome them here this evening. And we are very pleased to welcome all of you here to support the young people that are your children, and perhaps that you know anyway from your own companies. We've got two strangers in our midst, if I can use that phrase. Our organist, Reverend Peter Folks from Whetstone, I gather now. He's moved parishes, who's very kindly offered to come along and to help us out in various spots in the programme. We shall see more of him in the second half. And a young lady who has taken to the band quite well. She was invited by me to come along and to play our timps and also the drum kit that we've got here. Beverly Hayward, who has joined us from Walsall, from one of the schools in Walsall, Shire Comprehensive School. Beverly and Peter Fox. Beverly's so taken with the Brigade, she'd like to join us now. So we've done a bit of recruiting as well. We're now going to play you 3 shortened versions of light infantry pieces, Jalalabad, light infantry itself, and the Royal Green Jackets, and we've put them together as a light infantry medley number 1. We're going to play them up-tempo, if I can use the sort of modern phrase. Not quite as fast as the light infantry, but fast enough. going to prepare themselves for their display on floor level after our next item. The next item, and the item which will finish our part in the first section of this concert, is Bert Campert's Swinging Safari in an arrangement by Siebert. We now hand over to our drum corps, who are going to do a very short display in a minute amount of room, the front here. I think they're all ready. Just got to make sure at the back, it's in glue at the back, I can't quite see. Yes, I think they are. So ladies and gentlemen, can I present a short display by the drum corps of the National Band. members of the National Band are leaving the stage, it's now time for me to introduce our guests this evening, the band from St Michael's, Taunton. They were supreme champions last year in the National Band competition, and this is a kind of double bill, really, if I may use the pun, because Bill Walker is the captain in charge of the company, CO, and he was also CO of St Hugh's Scunthorpe, and they were supreme champion runner-up in conjunction with St Mary's Beverley. So there's a double bill for you, for Bill Walker. So may I introduce, may I say what great pleasure it gives me to introduce the band of St Michael's in Taunton. We start straight away with Sussex by the Sea. Sometimes proves a slight embarrassment to us when we're out. Because the usual thing that happens is that if the band is marching through the streets, we call out the march. Oh, you are quick tonight. You're quicker than when you were at Earl Shilton. We do it by sort of cutting the title of the march and just calling it one word. But you can imagine it's very difficult with this march. The March of the Cobblers. that became quite a popular song in the hit parade during, I don't know whether it was the course of this year, was it this year? Or last year? 82, oh dear me, a bit out there. And who was it sung about? Modern romance. Well, it's not modern romance tonight, it's us. We're going to have a go at the best years of our lives. And that is the march Under the Double Eagle, a very good, rousing American march. come to a section in the programme which is not on your programme, but is a little star on mine. Every year, at the end of our tour, we have an impromptu concert. Very impromptu. And the various members of the band get together and work out a few little ditties and songs and silly things that they can do, really just to sort of round off the tour. And we have two very, very good budding poets amongst us. And they always make up a poem every year about me and the staff, with various ones taking on sort of accolades which they're not really entitled to. I gather I'm called the Lord Suet. Then we have, what's your name? The Disciple Simon. We used to have the Prophet Wulga, but he's now gone to more exalted circles. He's up amongst the guests. And then we have, what's yours? I can't remember what they are. Well, perhaps if we get the two budding poets to come down, they'll introduce us, and then they'll go into the one that they've composed specially for you tonight, for here. And that is our Bugle Major Ian Cassell and Mr. Eugene Lukyanenko, one of our drummers. This one's entitled The Band Ballad. There was a man who had a dream to build a band that would be seen. He toiled and struggled against a few who did not want it to come true. The dreamer's name was Major Suet, and so the governor said so be it. With the backing of the YMC, the band then had a destiny. The band then started in '79 with only 45 in line. And by the end of '83, the band had grown considerably. The members of the band would agree that it was the stuff that made us be. The work they did that put us right is shown here now for you tonight. The band has toured across the nation with good spirit and presentation. From north to south and east to west, they've heard the band play at its best. During those years, we've hit the top, playing for the important lot. The Queen and Prince Philip have heard us play in the Royal Tournament on a July day. The band has had its ups and downs, its frustrations and its frowns, but in the end it's plain to see that we're just one happy family. Now the band is 150 strong, and with the helpers 200 long. What the future has to hold, that story is yet to be told. Thank you. They were very polite tonight. It's usually a sung version when we get it. Still, thank you to our two members. We now play you a famous memory from Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats. second light infantry medley, featuring mechanised infantry and half forward. I'm pleased to say that the Lord Lieutenant is an ex-light infantryman and was rather pleased with our tempo. I hope that we can keep the tempo the same in this second one. the Brazil and Tijuana taxi. ballet. And we begin with a very unusual piece, the Pavan Bataille, or the Battle Pavan. This is written by a man who is not very well known, even by many of the music historians, Tieleman Susato. He was a trumpet player who lived in Antwerp, in Belgium. It's not sure when he was born, but it's thought that he died somewhere around the year 1560 to 1561. And his job was to go up into a big tower in Antwerp and to sound the call so that people could tell what time it was, what hour of the day it was. And he opened a music business, and he wrote many trumpet pieces to be performed in the churches in that time. And this is one of them. Very stately dance, the Pavan, and I've arranged it for the band, and we have the use of the organ as well. The Battle Pavan by Tieleman Susato. We now play Great Little Army, one of the Kenneth Alford marches. now come to another favourite of ours, played very, very often by the light infantry bands. The Morehouse Reese Bradley High on a Hill, which again features our solo bugles. Would you like to hear a bit of that again? We'll do from the middle bit, let it do. Excuse me, I've got to tell them where it is. Shall you come back in? Let it do. Lost chord. Well, we've blown well tonight. Now it's your turn. We're going to see how well you can sing. So, I'll give you a brief 5 seconds to get your vocals in trim. I'm sure you know this very well known hymn, Jerusalem. And then we're going to sing Margaret Thatcher's favourite, Land of Hope and Tory. Sorry, I didn't mean that, didn't I? First of all, Jerusalem. This is your big moment. If you sing it well, I shall get you to stand for the next one. No, I won't say any more. Right, that wasn't bad for starters. Now let's see how well you do on the next one. We've got a little introduction for you. So, and it comes in with a big bump at the end and then it's your turn, because we're going to stop then. That wasn't bad for starters. That wasn't bad for starters. Let's hear a bit of that hoil that we have down in Wales where I come from. I'm a reject from Wales, now I live in the Black Country. So let's hear you really give that some punch. Very well done. We'll send you down to the proms and you can do it down there on the last night. Give them a good lead in. Well, we come to the very end now, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I know. It's terrible when you come to the end. Lord Mancroft once said, "A speech is like a love affair. Any fool can start it, but to end it requires considerable skill." So I've got it written down here on a piece of paper. Because I didn't think I'd be able to remember it, but I got out here. Right, we're going to finish with the evening prelude. This is a very special arrangement by the Royal Marines, one of the ex-Royal Marines directors of music, Captain Paul Neville. And it features the bugles at the very end playing the last post, and we will be playing the Abide With Me.
Mike's already dropped one hint about speeches, and it's been taken. And in any case, after what you've heard this evening, words have very little significance. But I've been asked to perform a little task which gives me very great pleasure, because if it isn't already evident to all of you, I know it is to many, that Mike is a particular friend to the Brigade and a person I'm pleased to call a particular friend of mine, and my wife thinks is all right, and that But these folk behind me, who've entertained us all so splendidly this evening, have asked that Mike receive a little memento of this particular occasion. And because I'm the only person in the Brigade who has to do as he's told, I'm here. There is at least one sympathetic soul. Mike, with great pleasure, with admiration, with gratitude from me and from this lot, will you please receive this? And God bless you all.
I've been led up the garden path because I was told there was a presentation, but I thought it was to these. Thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. It really is very appreciated. But I think I've got to thank these people personally. They've done a great job. They've worked very hard today. We were here at 9 o'clock and they've worked solidly through the day. They've had a short break this afternoon so they could go down and watch Leicester. They watched from outside. But I think I must thank all the people, I know it's been done earlier on, but I think I must thank all the people who have contributed to putting on this concert. All the folks who are attached to the National Band staff. And also, I must thank the Leicester Regiment for hosting us here at the De Montfort and helping and doing all the work this evening outside and around about in order to allow us to come out here and to do our bit as well. My thanks to them, and I hope you will give a great round of applause for them, please. Members, because we're a team and the whole thing wouldn't work without the teamwork that we put into it. But I've got to give my thanks and admiration and those of the band members to one man who has worked really hard. He's dashed about here like a fool this evening, but I think he really should have a special hand from us, and that's Tony Mann, our liaison. He's one of the true bricks of the Brigade, I think. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I wish you a safe journey home. We're going to play you out to a real favourite ditty of ours, Blaze Away. So blaze away home safely. Thank you very much. We hope to see you next year.